Welcome back. So in this lesson, in this series of videos, I want us to build a functionality where our client can provide query parameters so that they can, in a sense, filter the results returned by our JSON responses. So at the end, the client should be able to do something like specify the name, specify the level, specify the mode, um, and also specify which page. Okay, so let's say starting on page 1, the first page, and specify how many records should be returned per page. And so in this case, we want only 5 records to be returned per page, assuming that, excuse me, there are multiple records that cannot fit on a single page. And of course, the client should be able to do a bit of sorting. Here we're saying that we want the results to be sorted in descending order. That's why I have a negative here. Descending order. If I didn't have that, it would be ascending order. So descending order based on mode. Okay, so that's what we want. So in essence, we want to be doing filtering. Eventually, we'll be able to do search, allow the user, the client to perform a search. And of course, we want to be able to do pagination, right? Which is what these page parameters or keys are about. Listing or specifying how many records can be returned per page, which we call pagination. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So for us to actually incorporate this new functionality, we need to create a couple helper functions. So since the client will be providing the parameters as query parameters, we need a way to be able to parse those query parameters. And if you recall earlier in our course, we did such a thing where we got the parameters that were passed in. Okay, so that's nothing new. Also, since page, we need to actually deal with integers here and here. We need to be able to take the query parameters, and remember the query parameters are strings, so we'll need a function, a helper function that takes the string and converts it to an int. Likewise, the mode, we can have different types, okay, separated by a comma. So we need a helper function that is able to take this query parameter and grab each of the pieces. So we'll need to sort of split this parameter based on the comma. All right. So what we'll do, we will, in this first part, we will create these functions that we will be calling from our handler that will help us to build this functionality. Now, let's look at our handler. So let's go back to endpoints. And so when it is all done, we will be able to have this get handler. So notice we have a post which creates a new school. But when we use a get method for the same URL pattern, we will call the list school handler. Okay, let me list schools handler. All right, so we'll be able to list all the schools. Okay, and so as it says here, we will show the details of all schools. Again, because there could be multiple schools, maybe 100 schools, we want to be able to show a certain amount at a time. Again, something that we call pagination. All right, so that's the task. Let's get started. Okay, so we need to create some helper functions, and so let's start off by creating the first helper function, which essentially reads the query parameters. So a very simple function. So let me go to our CMD helpers that go. Okay, and we will create a couple helper methods. Okay, I'll come all the way down here. And so the first one is going to be, right, so I'm going to give the definition. So it's going to be called read string. Okay, so the read string method does something very simple. All it does, it returns a string value, right, which we know from the query parameters. Okay, from the query parameter string, or it returns a default value if no matching key is found. Right? So a very straightforward function. So let's create that, well, method, because it is a method on application. Okay. Alright, so read string. Alright. Now this method will take the map. Right, so you remember there's a map called well, of type URL values, which will contain the query parameters, the key and the value as a string. So we're going to pass in that map to our read string method, and then we're going to pass in also the key that we are looking for. So again, we could have done all of this functionality inside our handler, but why do that? Right? Our handler shouldn't have a lot of code that gets repeated. So we're just going to factor that out into a method where we can call that method, and it gives us what we want. All right, so we pass in the key, we pass in the map, and then we also pass in a default value that should be returned in the event that the key was not found. All right, so again, the handler will pass in the default value. Okay, now we will return, of course, a string. All right. Okay, so this method is straightforward. All we have to do is to get the value. So get the value. That's easy enough. Let's store that in a variable name value, and we'll simply say QS, name of the map. And then remember, there's the get method, and then we must provide what? The key. And the key will be key. All right. And of course, we need to actually check to see if the key, if the value returned is not the empty string. Because if you recall, if there is no associated key, then an empty string is returned. So let's check for that empty string. So if value is not equal, or yeah, if value is equal to the empty string, then we know we have a problem. And so we will simply return the default value that was provided to us. right? In the event that we couldn't find the key, or we couldn't find the value for the associated key. Now, if the value is not the empty string, then we will simply return value. Okay. Okay, and that's it. Pretty straightforward method. All right, and I will leave it here. So in the next video, we will continue where we will implement the next helper method that we need, which is to take care of the commas, okay, where we have multiple values returned in the mode query parameter. I'll see you in that next video.